If we tally everything up, over the course of me doing car sales, I made about, hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, we're gonna be talking about my time as a car salesman, and we're gonna talk about my best month as a car salesman, and then my worst month as a car salesman. And then I'm also going to include all of the cars that I have bought and sold personally, and I think that this will really explain to you guys how I'm able to afford the cars that I have now. And so yeah, let's just get right into it. Now, this is a ton of information to condense into a short video, so I'm just gonna have to kind of graze over everything, so to speak. So first off, I started out as a car salesman all the way back in 2017. Now, just to briefly explain why I went into car sales, I went to the University of Utah for about a semester, absolutely hated it. Nothing against the University of Utah, just hated college. And for me, it just was a very expensive learning experience in the sense that I realized I never want, well, I shouldn't say never, but most likely never want to do college. It cost me about $4,000 after all the costs and everything, because I lost a lot of scholarships that I had because I dropped out, which is kind of silly to me. But yeah, that's just how it is. I mean, even if you have everything covered, if you drop out, they're like, yep, you know what? You're gonna have to pay for stuff now, kiddo. But yeah, it was like a $4,000 lesson. And so I dropped out of college and I said, you know what, if I'm not gonna be in college, I need to have a professional grade job where I'm making good money. Otherwise, I can't justify not going to college. So I looked at a bunch of jobs and I found car sales, and basically it was an advertisement saying, hey, do you want to make on the low side $50,000 a year to, we have some people making over $140,000 a year. And I was 19 years old at the time, and I was like, well, yeah, I do. So I applied, and actually applied to a Honda store, and the Honda store had too many salespeople. And so they said, you know what, we have an opening over at a Dodge Ram store. Would you be interested? And I'm like, I don't really know. I'm like, I think those cars are kind of crappy. I'm like, I don't really think I'd be interested in selling them. But I'm like, you know what, fine, I'll at least go give it a try. I interviewed, and the guy that I interviewed with was like the most hardcore old school sales guy you will ever meet in your life. And he kind of intimidated me quite a bit. And I was like, I'm not sure if this is the fit for me. So I told him, I'm like, you know what, I'll get back to you. And he's like, get back to me? He's like, I don't know if I want you anymore after saying that. So I was like, oh gosh. But anyways, I left, and then I thought about it for like a day, and then the next day I woke up and I said, you know what, I'm gonna do this. So I called him and I was like, okay, I'm in. So then he's like, hey, you can start at this time. We've got to go through the time pretty quickly here. So starting in January of 2017, that's when I started sales. And from January till April, I really didn't make all that much money doing sales. I had a base pay of $1,500 a month. And then I made another $100 per car that I sold. And this was kind of like your training pay. And I saw this as a huge win because I was paying a university $4,000 for a semester to learn. Whereas in this situation, I was learning a bunch of real life stuff, and I was getting paid to do it. So for me, it was a huge win. I also worked on the side, made another $500 to $1,000 a month just to get by and also save money and all that kind of stuff. But that was kind of like the first 4 months with sales, is not really making a lot of money and just learning how to sell cars. Now, this was a huge transition for a lot of car dealerships in this kind of time period, where a lot of dealerships were starting to pay their salespeople off of volume rather than gross commission. And so it lent to a different selling style, which actually benefited someone like me a massive amount, because I'm a younger person, and being a younger person, I'm not intimidating to customers, and also I learn quick and I adapt quickly, whereas a lot of the older salespeople that were used to the hardcore selling, basically, it took them a lot longer to adapt. And so basically with this volume plan is you got paid for how many cars you sold. It doesn't matter how much profit the dealership made. None of that matters. It just matters if you sold cars. So you were incentivized to try to get as many people in and out as you could, which again, being a younger person, it's kind of easier to do that. You've got the energy to work with a bunch of different people, and just growing up and all that kind of stuff, I'm just not a confrontational person whatsoever. And so it just made it very easy to kind of like fit into that mold really well. And so then by May of that year, I sold like 10 cars, and that was really big because at that dealership, with how their pay plan was set, if you sold 10 cars, your base pay was $4,000, plus you got some other stuff on the side. And so usually if you sell 10 cars, you're gonna make $4,500 to $5,000, which for a 19-year-old kid is just ridiculous. So that was really exciting for me, and I kind of just kept continuing to improve over the year. I think my best month that year was in August. It usually is. August is my birthday month, so I usually do pretty good in August. And I believe I made around $7,000 or $8,000 that, well, let's see. So it was 14 cars, yeah, so it was about $7,000 or $8,000 that month. And again, as I just turned 20 that month, that was just crazy. I've never made that much money in my life before, and so it was life-changing for me personally. And obviously, I was able to pay off all of the student debt that I had, which was all $4,000 of it, because I was making money at this professional job. And I decided to buy my first fun car, which was a $20,000 Porsche Boxster S, which I drove for quite some time, and I completely broke even on it. I drove it for 4,000 or 5,000 miles, and I sold it for how much I paid for it, and so I got to drive a car for free. And that was kind of like something that it was a theme later on as I bought and sold cars personally while working at the dealership, and now what I do for the YouTube channel as well. Now, after the entirety of 2017, I ended up making a little bit over $50,000, which for not having a college degree and just jumping into something and trying to learn it for a first year, I think that was just, I don't know, it was crazy. And again, for me, it was life-changing. Like, that was so much money. I didn't even know what to do with it at the time. I saved as much as I could, but also trying to enjoy myself, right? And so, yeah, that was my first year. And then I had a huge slump. So in December of 2017, and this was the last time I've ever gone on vacation, which is kind of sad. I need to go on vacation again. I went on vacation, and so I came back from vacation in December, and I only sold 6 cars that month. And so my first paycheck of 2018 was for like $2,000, and going from making $7,000 to making $2,000, I mean, it hurt. Obviously, I saved my money, so it wasn't like I was in a bad financial situation, but it's difficult. And I was really down in the dumps, and in January of 2018, I only sold 6 cars again, and so I made about $2,000. And yeah, it was just, again, just super down in the dumps. And the thing that really sucked is that previous month, the dealership group that I was working for had this huge meeting where you saw people collect these bonus checks because they sold so many cars, and the bonus checks on the low side were 2,500 bucks, and some of these people are getting checks that were for $15,000, which, I mean, was crazy money to me at the time. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get one of those in 2018. And I come into 2018 and I am not tracking to get a single check. If you guys are wondering, to get the $2,500 check, you had to sell 175 cars. If you're selling 6 cars in a month, that is not even tracking for the lowest bonus. And I said, I'm gonna at least get the $5,000 check. And so I remember I was telling the managers and all that, I'm like, I'm gonna get this. And they're like, yeah, right, kid. They're like, you need to just learn how to sell cars, not even worry about these bonuses, because you are way far off. And so that kind of like put this fire under me, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna prove these guys wrong. And so as 2018 progressed, I kept selling more and more cars. So January I only sold like 6, but then the next month I more than doubled that, sold like 14 cars, and then 17. And then I think after a couple months, then I started selling over 20 cars a month. And then my best month in 2018, I sold 27.5 cars. Now, a few of those deals rolled over into the next month, so I didn't get paid on them that month. I believe I got paid on 24.5 cars, which between the bonuses I got and because of the volume pay and all that kind of stuff, in total, I made about $14,000, which I had just turned 21 that year. And so for someone who's 20, just turning 21, I mean, making $14,000 in a month is just ridiculous. I saved most of it, but at that point I decided to kind of go a little bit crazier with the cars. So a few months prior to that, I had bought my first new truck, which was a 2018 Ram Rebel, biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. And then I bought a 2017 Shelby GT350 right after I had that big month where I made $14,000. Second biggest mistake I've ever made in my life, and the reason being is between these 2 cars, I lost $12,000 to depreciation, and that is still to this day the most amount of money I have lost on the ownership of vehicles, which, yeah, it was just so painful for me. But yeah, I mean, it was a lesson well learned, and this was kind of when I was starting to kind of really make some YouTube videos, just a little bit, not that many. I'd make like 1 or 2 a month. And so, yeah, this was like, okay, this is what I don't want to do if I'm going to eventually do this YouTube thing in the future. Now, as 2018 progressed, it just kept going really good, and I was making really good money, and I was saving most of my money because I was spending so much time working, I didn't have any time to spend the money, which was a really good thing, honestly. And so after that whole year ended up finishing, I ended up selling 210 cars, which gave me the second bonus level. So I got a $5,000 bonus check at the end of the year. And I mean, between, not the bonus check didn't count for the income that year. So between everything, I ended up making about $120,000, which for being a 20-year-old kid that well, I guess technically 21 because I turned 21 at the end of that year. I mean, that was just really good. And I saved most of the money. I was pretty smart. Obviously, I lost 12 grand between those two cars because I was done with that whole situation. But then this is where things kind of started to change a little bit. So my technical best month ever income-wise from sales was December of 2018, because I sold 17 or 20 cars in December, which wasn't my big month sales-wise, but then I got the bonus check, and then I also asked to get paid for my vacation pay. And so then I think the check that I got in January for December was like $17,000 or $18,000. I purposely stacked everything as much as I could so I get the biggest check ever so that I could feel like a baller, even though I wasn't gonna spend the money. But that was technically like my best month ever selling cars was $18,000. But the thing that's funny is my worst month selling cars was about $1,500. So like there's a huge range in income. And I mean, the thing that's crazy to me is that same year, in 2018, I had 1 month where I made like $2,000, and I had 1 month where I made almost $20,000. Like, that's how crazy things can get with sales from an income perspective. Now, fast forward to 2019, and going through this entire year, things kind of started to go down slightly for the sales. And the reason was because of this YouTube channel. I started to really split my attention in 2019. I didn't really make any videos in 2018. I made a couple in 2017, but 2019, I said, I need to have a second source of income, and I need to make this YouTube thing work because I enjoy making the videos so much. So I went and committed to making a video every single day. Well, having my attention split between selling cars and making videos doesn't work very well. And so my sales started to go down a little bit. And it was kind of a crazy situation. It was kind of like a roller coaster where at the beginning of the year, my income started going down a little bit, but then YouTube became monetized and just blew up. And so then basically what happened is I had a roller coaster, and then it just skyrocketed, especially towards the end of the year of 2019. And so at the by the end of that year, from sales and everything, I still made about 6 figures. I'd made a little bit less than $120,000, so I technically had a worse year from sales. But because of YouTube and all that stuff, and I'm not really going to talk about the YouTube income, it's something that I'm just going to kind of, we're going to keep secret for a while. I ended up making still more in 2019 than I made in 2018. So that was positive, but it kind of showed me that the sales thing wasn't the route to go for me long term. If we tally everything up, over the course of me doing car sales, I made about $300,000 roughly. But the biggest thing is I made $300,000 and I didn't spend $300,000. A lot of people, especially younger people like me, if they end up finding a way to be able to make a lot of money, they end up just going and throwing all of it away. It wasn't the case with me. Yes, I bought some fun cars, and yes, I made some mistakes along the way. $18,000 worth of mistakes, right? Which is kind of painful, but at the same time, people spend way more money on other things that are way dumber in my opinion, so I'm okay with it. So I really just spent so much time working that I couldn't spend any money, and because of that I saved a lot of money, invested it, and I think that's the way to go. Obviously you want to enjoy life, and so finding something that you love to do is very important, but I think that a lot of people that are younger are in the same situation that I was in back then, where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with life. And so I think finding a job like that where you can make really good money can set you up to do what you want to do, because having all that money saved up, having that stability allowed me to jump into YouTube and pursue it. Because if I wasn't making as much money as I was at the car dealership, I wouldn't have been able to go and film videos on my day off and get this YouTube channel up and running. I would have had to work a second job or something like that, that obviously long term isn't gonna make crazy money. And so I would say that if you can find something like that, do it, make some money, and then once you have that money, then that gives you freedom to kind of pursue other things, which, I mean, for me has been amazing, because now I'm making a lot of money and I'm doing what I love. And I am working more hours than I worked at the dealership, but again, since I love it, it's definitely worth it. If you guys are wondering how many hours I worked to achieve that, some weeks I'd work 40 hours, most weeks were 50, sometimes 60 hours, and then very rarely 70 hours a week, whereas YouTube is like 60 to 70 hours a week every single week. But again, I enjoy it. It's a little bit different because a lot of the work is from home, whereas with that, I had to be at the dealership for those 50, 60, 70 hours, whereas this, it's like half of the time is spent filming, and then half the time is spent editing. So it's a little bit different, but it's still a lot of work. Again, I just enjoy it more. Other than that, I'll see all of you guys in the next video.